the Onyx Studio 7. It looks like a spaceship, but it's actually a speaker. It's a speaker that replaces, funny enough, the Onyx Studio 6. I liked the form factor of the Onyx Studio 6. I know a lot of people were saying it looks like a handbag. The handbag to me was the Helsinki, the Viva Helsinki. This is, if it's anything, it's a man bag. This takes some power to carry around. It's clearly a lifestyle product. So I used to think Harman Kardon, they're the people that knew what they were doing at JBL. They sent them to another company. I now realise Harman Kardon is actually the lifestyle branch of JBL. In other words, we're already charging you a lot of money for our speakers compared to the value you can get. But if we make them even prettier, we can charge you even more. That seems to be what you get with Harman Kardon. We've got the Onyx Studio 7. So is the design something to be marvelled at? I have to say, I think this is something I would design on a good night out after several pints of lager, maybe a lot of whiskey, because none of this makes sense. I would tell you why. First of all, as you know, put something on a flat surface, on a firm surface, the speaker can use that surface, deliver more bass. You get gain when you use a corner, a floor, a wall. You get gain in the bass. Can you see how much of that surface area, the bottom of the speaker, is in contact with the floor, whatever it is you've got it on, a sturdy desk, compared to got a teeny little bit of an area there with a bit of plastic to protect it, and a teeny weeny bit on this handle. I don't know what you're going to call it. It's just very weird. So problem number one, we've got less surface area now in contact with whatever you're putting it on. That means less gain in the bass, less potential gain in the bass. You may not want any gain, put on some fancy speaker stands, keep it well into the room, away from walls. You may not want gain, but the possibility is reduced. That's problem number one. Problem number two is we used to have one tweeter on the right side. Yeah, on the right side, not the middle. You'd never know they were connected to JBL, would you? Passive radiator, woofer. We now have tweeter, passive radiator, woofer. First of all, so probably the same drivers, but in a different configuration. Does that matter? Well, look, can you see how this speaker is now kind of slightly slanted that way, with a passive radiator slightly pointing up, the woofer there, but it's a different configuration and slightly different, the way it radiates sound. Sound is a wave. The way it radiates out is different. And that means, whereas I'm doing my recordings, minimizing reflections to get up the purest sound I can, when you put these speakers, you may have both speakers, you put them in the same room, they'll sound more different than they will in my recordings, because radiates sound in a different way. Once they start using room reflections, can sound quite different. So it's really important to realize that the room you put these speakers in, how much they interact with the room, which they will, because they have a different driver configuration, will affect the sound. So you may get people telling you they sound quite different. They found them quite different than I might find. No spoilers in this video, because minimizing room reflections in the real world, that won't happen. So different configurations and slightly pointed up. Going to hit the ceiling, whereas this is flat on. Not going to do that as an early reflection, is it? This, I'm calling it a handle. Clearly, you're going to have to hold it that way. First of all, you want to put it in your backpack. That's nice and friendly, nice and slim that way. Immediately, that's an issue. Immediately, you want to put this in your luggage. You're traveling. It's an issue. That's going to be a problem. It's taking up more space. Look at the width it now has to take up. And not removable. You can't remove this. So to me, this is Harman Kardon saying, we do lifestyle products. We want you to pay for speakers, pay over the odds for speakers because they look nice, they feel nice. But in terms of practicality, we've got this metal bar right across here. What else have we got here? Oh yeah, we've got tweeters. I have to tell you, when I tried to measure this in the frequency response, it was showing me I was getting a cutoff above 10 kilohertz. I realise now It was the way I was recording it, because there's interaction with the tweeters, which I think are just there, and the bar. So I'm not getting the purest, I wasn't getting a fair comparison. I'm going to redo that. You won't see that in this video. Do that down the line. Just to say, there is interaction with the tweeters. I know the tweeters are quite directional, but it's still a wave at the end of the day. It's still radiating out, and that's a bar right where the tweet and the red passive radiator is. This is designed by someone who's saying, purely, I want it to look nice. Oh, look, it stands out on the shelf. But does it help the sound? Not at all. Less surface area across the drivers. You can't remove it. You can't put it in your backpack. To me, this design is absolute lunacy. As far as the fabric goes, it is a thinner fabric. Does that help the sound? I don't know. But here's the thing. It's thinner fabric. There's no IPX rating. So we don't know if this is waterproof or not. To me personally, it's more like they're probably waiting for the rating, because they don't have any IPX, whether it's 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, they're not publicising it. Does it float? Well, you know, I do reviews. I've had to drop it in water. It does float, and it does, like the Onyx 6, it does float with the drivers up, and you can play it. When I take it, it does soak up a lot of water. I didn't leave it in for long. When I took it out, it did play. And the other thing to note is no cover. No cover over the USB-C connection. It says for service, and I don't know what service you're going to get via that, but you have, of course, your proprietary, well, I'm saying proprietary, it's not proprietary at all, is it? It's a barrel charger that goes in there. What's the advantage in that? Well, it's a 19 volt 2 amp charger, that's 38 watts. USB-C, 5 volts, 2 amps, that's normally 10 watts. Going to get a lot faster charging. Of course, potentially USB-C can deliver a lot more than that, but normally they don't. So we could say, oh, okay, fair enough. 38 watts of charging versus would have been 10 watts of charging. We do get an auxiliary input. But kind of this day and age kind of suggests that means it's old-fashioned. Is it old-fashioned? Well, let's have a look at all the specs. You can probably get this cheaper. I've already seen people saying they're getting it at a decent price. However, for me in the UK, I'm only seeing it advertised at £249 on the Harman Kardon website. But that's the same as they advertised the Onyx 6. But I know I can get that for £180. So you can probably get these for the same price. However, for me now, I'd have to pay £70 more for an extra tweeter, because they appear to be the same drivers, just a different configuration. Is that worth it to you? We'll have to wait and see. Onyx 6, 2 years old. This is a new speaker. In terms of battery, I think they're basically the same battery, but they kind of advertise the specs in a different way. So depending on how you read those specs, this is that comes out at 11.7 watt hours, 11.9 watt hours. It's not here or there whether it's the same battery or not. In terms of actual capacity, they're basically the same. They're basically tiny, tiny batteries. If you're playing full volume on your battery, you're likely to get about an hour. You're probably going to want to use that in terms, because they don't really go that loud, even though they're both rated at 50 watts. So in terms of using it portable, because I do only review portable Bluetooth speakers, it's not that portable. You're probably going to want to use it with the mains lead plugged in, because it's only 50 watts when you've got direct power going into it. When I say direct power, mains power going into it. Otherwise, it's clearly not playing at 50 watts. We'll get to that in the tests. So Harman Kardon, but it's still SBC, basic codec, still Bluetooth 4.2, modern speaker. So clearly they've just come up with a new design, rehashed the old drivers, stuck a new tweeter in. But it's money for old rope, really, isn't it? Bluetooth 4.2. Now, they say, as they always have said, you can pair two of them, but it's a dual audio, whatever they want to call it. But you can't play them in stereo. However, I haven't got to try in stereo. But you keep telling me you can play them in stereo by pressing the play pause button for a few seconds on both. Once you get them connected, and then press the play pause button for a few seconds, a couple of seconds, I think on both of them, and everybody's saying they will then play in stereo. So do they play in stereo? Apparently yes. Can I confirm that? No, because I don't have a pair of the same model to try it. But I think backwards compatible. Some of them, different models, still play in stereo. So they both have that auxiliary input because they're old-fashioned speakers, so that's something for not modernising their tech. Can't use them as power banks, and you can't use them as speaker phones. Not a lot of functionality going on. Rated at 50 watts, that's the headlines, but only if you have your Power lead actually directly plugged in. In terms of weight, we're slightly heavier now. 3.3 kilos now on the Onyx Studio 7, 2.9 kilos we were on the Onyx Studio 6. Is that the weight of a tweeter? Possibly. They're both really, really crap in terms of Bluetooth latency. In my testing, the Onyx Studio 7, teeny bit better, 170 milliseconds I was getting on YouTube. Similar local files, 180 milliseconds YouTube for the Studio 6. So both really poor. Really, you're looking at 50 to 80 milliseconds on a decent Bluetooth latency. So obvious lip sync when you're watching movies. That's pretty much the specs. I'm going to get straight into the first comparison. I'm going to tell you right now, they seem to be same drivers, same amp, same everything, don't they, on paper, apart from the extra tweeter. So you think they're probably going to play at the same volume scale. They have messed with that volume scale. They don't play in a linear way. The lower down the volume scale you go, the louder, by comparison, the Onyx 7 will play. By the time you hit 80%, actually they're about the same, and then we'll see about maximum volume. I'm pointing these out because you're going to see people pull out the 6 and the 7 and then say, play them 40%, 50%. They're going to play them at the same volume, and then you're going to make a decision based on how they sound. But when I play, I'm going to play now 40% volume. But this plays louder. So if you do not normalize them, it automatically gives an advantage to the Onyx 7. You're going to make a judgment on it. People say, well, don't normalize it. I am normalizing it because it's going to make the Onyx 7 seem more dynamic and have a little bit more bass compared to the 6 than it really has. So 40% volume, and then that little bit of volume difference normalized for Lufts in post-processing. When I normalize them to 40%, my first impressions, yes, of course, we've gone from slightly right side. And by the way, if you want to get the right impression from this speaker, I don't normally say wear your headphones because not required for my recordings. They're not binaural. You can smash me down for that. I have my own reasons why that's better, but there you go. However, if you want to get the right-sided nature, if you play these through speakers, of course it's going to play left and right anyway. You're not going to get the real differences between these speakers. Play them through headphones and you will probably hear the right-sided nature because they're connected to JBL. They do things their own way. They put the tweeter on the right side. You listen center on, of course it's going to sound as though it's to the right. So we've got tweeters now left and right. Does that make a difference? Oh, absolutely. So personally, my impressions are, yes, that tightens up the vocals especially. It's now nicely centered and more focused. Centered and more focused. with the Onyx 7 compared to the right-sided nature. However, I've got to tell you, when I normalise them, making everything fair, so they are the same volume in terms of lufts, I'm getting 1 decibel more in the bass. I know I'm seeing people say, oh, there's more bass in the Onyx 7. I'm telling you, when you normalise them, in my recordings, and it may be different in your room, as I said, because they're going to radiate sound in a different way because of how the drivers are arranged. But for me, minimising reflections, I'm getting a decibel more in the mids, so not so focused in the vocals, a slightly bigger bass. That makes, for me, a warmer sounding speaker. Less bass but more focused highs means this now sounds like a tighter speaker. There's more clarity. Yes, it probably sounds more balanced, but we really loved this speaker because it was low bass, deep, heavy, if that sounded right. Not so much. This sounds a bit more like a normal speaker. So you may say, that sounds right. Do I prefer that? I guess I do, the Onyx 7. However, you're losing the character. This has got a nice warm character. And by the way, I do like the fabric, and I don't like the thin fabric on that one. To me, this just looks and feels a bit classier. I can still see, it's still the damp there. You know, I said I water tested it. I can still see the water has soaked up there. But those are the differences. Bear that in mind when you see people play them at the same volume, but don't normalise them. At 40%, as I said, it's not linear. But further down the volume scale you go, the more it's going to favour the Onyx 7. Are there any other differences? Yes, we have slightly stronger mids as well. So when you add the mix in, more focused in the highs for the vocals because it's centering it, a little bit stronger in the mids, and a little bit less bass, all comes together when you hear them in A-B to make it sound more focused, tighter, more clarity. But my first impressions at 40% are, we've lost some of that warm nature, cuddly nature of the speaker. It's more clinical. Is it more balanced? Absolutely. But I'm going to go to 60%. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to play them in the way you're going to find a lot of people playing them when you see other people do their YouTube video. I'm not knocking anybody. I will never do that. I'm only pointing out because you're going to make judgments on that basis. Understand, for instance, at 60%, the volume scale is slightly different on the Onyx 7. It will play slightly, I'm talking about a decibel. It's going to play about a decibel louder at 60%. And this is what happens if you don't normalise them. So if I just said to you, here they are at 60%, you're going to assume they're about the same loudness, and you're going to say, oh, blimey, look, that's definitely sounds a bit tighter, a bit more defined, a bit more dynamic. Well, yeah, it's about a decibel more dynamic, isn't it? Do you know why? It's playing a decibel louder. In terms of lufts, Minus 14, minus 15. That means that's a decibel playing it in perceived loudness terms, which is all that matters. It's playing a decibel louder. And even then, upper bass about the same, mid bass about the same. Only then does it give an advantage in the deep bass. Only then, if you don't normalise, does it give an advantage to the Onyx 7 and the deep bass. So let's go to 80% now, where actually the volumes are much closer anyway. As I said, it's not very linear. And I'm going to normalise them afterwards. To me, this is a fairer test. 80% is probably more where you're going to play it, because it doesn't go that loud at the end of the day, really does it. 80% volume, normalised.
Kill me a dream. I'm just stuck here in a dream. I'm just stuck here in a dream. I'm just stuck here in a dream. Don't know if I make it back. I'm just stuck here in a dream. Don't know if I make it back. I'm just stuck here in a dream. Don't know if I make it back. I'm just stuck here in a dream. Stuck here in a dream. Don't know if I make it back. I'm just stuck here in a dream. Don't know if I make it back. I'm just stuck here in a dream. Don't know if I make it back. I'm just stuck here in a dream.
So the Onyx Studio 6, Onyx Studio 7, the bass peak 53 Hz, basically the same, upper bass about the same. Now mid bass 65 to 100 Hz, this region here, it's a little bit stronger on the Onyx Studio 6. You also see on the Onyx Studio 6, if we look at the slope of the bass, the width of the bass, it's a little bit thicker, it's a little bit rounder, fuller on the 6. Not by much, but it's definite and it's there. So that's going to give the Studio 6 a bit of a warmer sound. But then we look at the mids and the highs. We see that's where the Studio 7 is a little bit stronger. The tuning is a little bit different. So stronger mids and highs at 80% volume, but less bass. But slightly less bass means overall it sounds tighter, a little bit more defined, but doesn't have the warm character of the Onyx Studio 6. The differences are small, but they are definite.
So 80% normalized. What is clear is dual tweeters makes it more focused. The vocals pop in a pleasant and pleasing manner. There's clarity there. It sounds tighter. The mids are stronger. It sounds a bit more balanced. But that bass, even now, I'm measuring a decibel more in the mids for the Onyx 6. Bear in mind, as I keep stressing, going to be different in your room because they are orientated. Can you see how that's slightly slanted? Because the passive radiator is up here, it's going to be pointing up. It's going to use your ceiling if you've got a very reflective ceiling in a way this one won't. Will it help? Will it make it sound more bass? I don't know. Only you will know in your room. Bear in mind, my recordings minimise room reflections. You get a purer sound. When you play them back over headphones, decent headphones should make them sound a bit more like being heard in a well-treated room from flat-sounding loud speakers. But to me, there's character in the Onyx 6 that I'm not getting from the Onyx 7. Would I prefer to listen to the Onyx 7? Yeah, probably. It sounds more right, more balanced, tighter, more focused. more like a hi-fi speaker. But there's something I'm missing, and that's the warmth. I kind of like the smoother sound of the Onyx 6. So even though I'm saying up to this point, I'd have to say that's a more right sounding speaker. There's a warmth and a woolliness that I'm missing from the Onyx 6, and they don't play in the same way. I'm hearing people say they're hearing more bass, and I think I know why. I think it's because it plays louder. It's an unfair advantage at lower volumes. I wonder if they've done that on purpose to the Onyx 7. So the only real way to find out what the actual headroom is, we need to go to maximum volume. Of course, you can plug your charger lead. By the way, there is the charger. It's a barrel charger, not really proprietary, but it's a barrel charger. I've already mentioned there are advantages over a normal USB-C, where you're going to get normally 5 volts, 2 amps. On battery then, 100% volume. So we're no longer talking about, but normalizing it and this is fair and that. I'm going to say pedal to the floor, 100% on battery, and it's every man for himself.
Staring out of my window, thinking about you like, well, I call but no you don't answer. Hey, what you doing right now? Oh, I'm trying to keep my eyes up, lose myself in the crowd. Oh, I might as well rise up, take a shit in the clouds. Tonight the city gon' light up, don't feel so lonely right now. Tonight the city ignite up, we made a jungle so cold. The city shit they get riled up, not looking for a way out. Tonight the city gon' hide up. I wanna see you now, I wanna hold you now, as the world falls down.
100% volume on battery power. Onyx Studio 6, Onyx Studio 7. There is a tad more loudness with the Studio 7. Almost certainly because it has the extra tweeter. And then we see that in the stronger mids and highs. In terms of actual peaks, identical. But the shocker is, when pushed to the limit on battery, Onyx Studio 7, bass peak minus 15.5. Onyx Studio 6, 14.4. We're 1 decibel up in the bass on the Studio 6 when completely pushed. So not just about tuning, this is the actual headroom of the speakers. The bass is bigger on the Studio 6. You can see how much fatter it is ultimately. We look at the edge there, it's got a bigger peak, and then look at the edge. Look how it falls away on the Onyx Studio 7. The bass is bigger. Now, these differences are small, but they are consistently a fuller bass on the Studio 6, but small. Consistently more mids and highs on the Studio 7, but it's small, but they add up to making the Studio 7 sound a little bit clearer, a little bit more clinical, a bit warmer now by comparison on the Onyx Studio 6.
So, first of all, when I talk about all the differences I've been talking about throughout the video, they are small. While they are definite, there's no doubt that sounds tighter, more focused. And this sounds warmer and more woolly. The differences are small. If you don't A-B them, you're not missing a hell of a lot. However, 100% on battery, ultimately, it goes a tiny bit louder on the Onyx Studio 7. It's got that extra tweeter. Is that what makes a difference? Probably, because I still measure a decibel advantage in the mid-lower bass to the Onyx 6. You can see it in the graphs. It's a slightly fatter bass. And the overall signature is warmer on the Onyx 6. So I still think the Onyx 6 will suit some people. It sounds more right on the Onyx 7. It's tighter, it's more refined, it's more balanced. It just isn't the character. I think it lacks character, even though it sounds more right. There's something nice about the Onyx 6 sound I'm still missing. I do think it's almost like the vinyl versus digital debate. There are a lot of compromises you have to make on vinyl, but a lot of people still like the vinyl sound. So, taste. as always, just I want to tell you what those differences are. Even the bass peak was a decibel up on the Onyx 7, on the Onyx 6. Okay, stick those mains leads in. What have we got? Maximum volume, all 50 watts now, with the battery charger, the mains lead plugged in.
Let's get big until I forget my name. Let's get big. Jump right, slide to the left. Let's get big. Live it up while you can, and let's do it again. Let's get big. If you wanna dance, I can tell you about this place I know, somewhere hidden in the side. No, don't waste your energy, even though we're 23. Gotta give you roll tonight. Let's get big. Let's get big. Let's get big. Let's get big. Until I forget my name. Let's get big. Let's get big. Let's get big. Let's get big.
So with the power lead plugged in, maximum volume 100%, speakers go louder. And again, it's that slight advantage, slightly louder to the Studio 7, slightly warmer bass on the Studio 6, slightly fuller bass. So it's been consistent all along. We look at the leading edge on the Studio 6 and compare it to the Studio 7. It's slightly fatter. If we look at the bass peak, around 50 hertz, minus 13.9, minus 14.7 on the Studio 7, which again means bass peak is 1 decibel stronger on the Studio 6. We see that in Luft's perceived loudness terms. Mid bass is stronger by a decibel on the Studio 6, but the Studio 7 benefits in the mids.
So all the way through, right to the end, the differences are the same. Ultimately, the Onyx Studio 7 plays a fraction louder. It does have that extra tweeter. It sounds more clinical. It's got the stronger mids. It's got more focused highs. Vocals are more defined, are clearer because they are now centered. Whereas they're a little bit woolly and a little bit smudged, I would say, on the Onyx 6. But the Onyx 6 does have a bigger bass. That's what I'm measuring. That's what I'm hearing. When you, even at maximum volume where there's no normalizing going on, even the bass peak, I'm measuring a decibel up on the Onyx 6. On the Onyx 6. It's got a warm, characterful sound, I would say. This is clinical. Sounds more balanced, but if you loved that bottom deep end, you're getting slightly less low-end resonance, which is, I see a lot of people talking about the low-end resonance you do get with the Onyx 6. Slightly less now with the Onyx 7. That's the difference between these two speakers. It's not huge either way, but it's enough to say I can definitely hear the difference. As I said, because of how these speakers are orientated now and the different way the drivers are configured, could sound quite different in your particular room, especially if it's quite reflective. But with all other things being equal, we've got a clinical, more balanced, but less low bass heavy speaker in the 7. You may think otherwise if you're only hearing them at the same volume, but hopefully whoever's doing that will also play at maximum volume and you'll hear what I'm talking about. I like the fabric. This is a thinner, cheaper feeling fabric. We know it for sure it's IPX7. We still don't know quite what's happening with the IPX rating. As I said, I did drop it in water. It did float. It did soak up a lot of water, but it did play, and it certainly played afterwards. But no covering on those ports at the back. Is that a clue to it's never going to be IPX7? So maybe that alone would be a reason to get the Onyx 6. However, that's the more hi-fi speaker, no doubt about it. I would say this is a more vinyl type of speaker, and for years I did listen to vinyl. Maybe that's why I quite like it. But I think this speaker is all about the bass that travels along the floor. It's resonant, and it's a lot of fun, even if the neighbours don't think so. It's a little bit less so on the Onyx 7. Not by a lot, about a decibel down on the Onyx 6. And that's the differences between the Onyx 6 and the Onyx 7 from my point of view. That's my slant on it. I look forward to seeing a lot of people shoot me down because they don't believe in my normalizing. Even if you forget about my normalizing, then just listen at maximum volume where that doesn't even come. You actually see the ultimate differences between the speakers. And it's the same thing, maximum volume, whether you normalize, lower down the volume scales or not. Thank you for watching. I hope, as usual, you got something out of my video, and I really do thank you for watching.